Indonesia holds the world's largest nickel reserves and has made a bold move. Ban raw ore exports, build dozens of smelters, and court global battery makers to turn ore into energy for the electric age. But as EV sales surge and battery chemistries shift, can this trillion-dollar bet really put Indonesia at the heart of the world's battery supply chain, or will it backfire? Nickel is a silvery, corrosion-resistant metal, element Ni, atomic number 28, long prized for stainless steel, and now crucial for EV battery cathodes because it boosts energy density and range. It is considered a critical resource and is often described as the fifth most common metal, with most of its occurrences found in the Earth's crust. In the 1400s, German miners stumbled upon a reddish-brown ore they were sure was copper. No matter how they smelted it, the copper refused to yield, and in frustration, they nicknamed the stubborn ore Kupfernickel, Saxon for copper devil. Centuries later, in the 19th century, the same metal earned a very different reputation. Prized for plating and alloys because it was tough, corrosion-resistant, and heat-tolerant. By 1857, the United States was even minting coins with it, cementing nickel's place in everyday industry. That durability turned out to be only half the story. Nickel also conducts and stores energy efficiently, which is why it moved from coins and steel into batteries. The shift began in the 1980s with NiCad and NiMa cells, then accelerated into today's EV era with NCA and NMC chemistries. Cathodes that can contain up to 80% nickel to deliver higher energy density and longer range. From copper devil to battery cornerstone, nickel's evolution mirrors the leap from old-world metallurgy to modern electric mobility. In Indonesia. The story begins in 1200, when the kingdom of Luwu rose on Bukit Poko. On this hill, overlooking the shores of Lake Matano, in today's central Sulawesi, stand the royal graves. A reminder that this landscape was more than a seat of power. It was an early center of metallurgy and trade. By 1250, Luwu's artisans were famed kris makers. Their blades, forged from Besi Luwu, an iron naturally enriched with nickel, were celebrated for being light yet remarkably strong. In 1293, a political marriage bound the realm to Majapahit. The Javanese Empire then secured imports of Luwu's nickel-bearing iron to fuel military campaigns across Sumatra, Kalimantan, and the Lesser Sundas. Modern nickel mining arrived centuries later. In 1901, Dutch scholar A. Kraut surveyed iron ore in the Verbeek Mountains of Sulawesi. E.C. Abandonon identified nickel ore at Pomala in 1909. Followed by exploration in 1934 by Ust Borneo Macapai, OBM, and Bone Tol Macapai. At Sorowako, geologist Flat Elves studied lateritic nickel in 1937. A year later, OBM shipped 150,000 tons of nickel ore to Japan, signaling Indonesia's entry into the global nickel trade. Today, Indonesia sits atop an estimated 55 million metric tons of nickel reserves, about 42.3% of the world total, placing it well ahead of Australia. And modern backbone was laid in 1968, when a contract of work was granted to PT International Nickel, Indonesia, INCO, across parts of South, Central, and Southeast Sulawesi, including Sorowako and Pomala. After years of exploration, feasibility studies, and construction, commercial production began in 1978. The company is now controlled by a Brazilian nickel miner and operates as PT Vale Indonesia, anchoring the country's nickel value chain. By 2021, nickel had moved to the forefront as more countries sought the metal for electrification, and the energy transition. A year earlier, global nickel reserves were recorded at 94 billion metric tons, with Indonesia holding the largest share at 22.4%, a signal that the country commands one of the world's most consequential sources of nickel. Domestically, the permit landscape showed increasing scale and structure. In 2020, there were roughly 330 mining business licenses, IUP, across 6 provinces: South Sulawesi, North Sulawesi, Central Sulawesi, Maluku, North Maluku, and West Papua, supported by a total of 328 resource entries, plus 2 contracts of work, COW. Taken together, this footprint connected upstream exploration and production to the emerging downstream agenda. In 2021, President Joko Widodo accelerated Indonesia's industrial downstreaming program and the development of electric vehicle, EV, batteries. The commitment materialized with the groundbreaking of PT HKML Battery Indonesia on the 15th September 2021 at Karawang New Industrial City, the first EV battery plant in Southeast Asia. The project, a collaboration between Indonesian partners and a South Korean consortium, integrates mining, smelting, refining, precursor cathode and cell manufacturing, backed by an investment of about $9.8 billion. The president also emphasized strengthening partnerships and involving MSMEs to capture broader technological and economic spillovers. Aligned with this push, Indonesia banned nickel ore exports effective 1st of January 2020 to spur domestic value add, manage national reserves, and anchor a local battery ecosystem. The policy was challenged by the European Union at the WTO, yet Indonesia maintains the measure is lawful under national regulations and justified by strategic economic interests. At this crossroads, the country's nickel narrative is shifting from a raw material supplier toward an architect of higher value supply chains, inviting investment while testing governance and long-term competitiveness. Global EV demand is set for a 2025-2030 super cycle. As Tesla, Hyundai, and BYD scale production, every incremental vehicle pulls the upstream battery chain and nickel into sharper focus. Indonesia, already a dominant ore and refined nickel supplier, sits squarely in this realignment of the EV supply chain. In 2024, EV sales reached roughly 17 million units, plus 25% year-on-year, pushing battery demand past 1 terawatt-hour and driving average pack prices below 100 kilowatt-hour US dollar, a tipping point that unlocks mass market adoption. Once costs fall through this threshold, the addressable market widens, utilization rises, and raw material pull strengthens across cathode supply. Indonesia is aiming to sit at the center of the electric vehicle EV battery supply chain by downstreaming, not just selling raw ore, but processing it at home. A 2020 export ban on raw ore, joint ventures in industrial parks, Morowali, Weda Bay, new cell lines in Karawang, and access to ASEAN markets are designed to turn geology into value. Nickel is central to the energy transition, but the way it's produced can carry a heavy carbon cost. A growing body of research shows that the land cleared for new mines can release far more emissions than the mining and processing steps themselves. In other words, before a single ton of ore is smelted, a project may already have locked in a large part of its climate footprint. A University of Queensland team, published in Nature Communications, examined hundreds of sites and found that land clearing emissions can be 400 to 500 times larger than direct operational emissions. Researcher Evelyn Mervine notes that nickel demand is set to double by 2050 as batteries and corrosion-resistant steels scale with clean energy infrastructure. Yet these land use emissions are often left out of carbon accounting, sustainability reports, and supply chain decisions. That gap risks underestimating the true climate cost of green metals. The local ecological signal is visible in Indonesia. A University of Greenwich study covering 7,721 villages in Sulawesi, 2011-2018, found that communities near nickel mines experienced nearly double the deforestation of non-mining villages. The authors stress that environmental impacts can take years to fully emerge. Even where roads, clinics, and services improve, the ecological pressure remains high, especially in already vulnerable landscapes. Health risks add urgency. In Halmahera, scientific monitoring around the Indonesia Weda Bay Industrial Park, IWIP, reported 47% of blood samples above safe limits for mercury and 32% above limits for arsenic. Researchers call this a serious warning, urging routine environmental surveillance, water, sediment, and seafood, plus firm enforcement against non-compliant operators. Without credible monitoring, communities bear unacceptable risk while the benefits of investment flow elsewhere. For ASEAN Finance Insider's audience, the signal is clear. Responsible nickel is not a slogan, it's an operating system. The path forward is transparent reporting, independent environmental audits, and public engagement. Cleaner power for processing, best available HAPAL practices, and tailings management, and robust traceability that meets emerging battery passport standards. Done right, the EV supply chain can scale without outsourcing its externalities, turning Indonesia's mineral advantage into durable, investable value rather than a liability. Beyond environmental issues, Indonesia faces trade and legal headwinds. The 2020 nickel ore export ban triggered a dispute with the European Union at the WTO, World Trade Organization, pitting resource sovereignty against multilateral trade rules. At the same time, key markets are rolling out battery passport traceability, embedded carbon disclosures and potential border charges, and tougher social due diligence requirements. Without credible compliance and transparency, the risks are not just legal, but commercial. Repeated audits, higher transaction costs, and restricted market access for downstream nickel products. Fossil-heavy power raises product carbon footprints, weakening competitiveness under carbon rules. Add domestic frictions, permitting clarity, central-local alignment, land acquisition, workforce readiness, and industrial safety, and the agenda is clear. De-risk with cleaner power, renewable PPAs and efficiency. Nickel is a once-in-a-generation economic opportunity for Indonesia. Its reserves and downstream strategy can unlock jobs, exports, and technology. But this is a high-stakes bet that must be balanced with environmental and social stewardship. Cleaner power for processing, best practice HAPAL, safe tailings, water and biodiversity protection, transparent monitoring, and real benefits for local communities. If Indonesia manages those risks, meeting global standards, securing long-term offtakes and sharing gains widely, the nickel strategy stops being a gamble and becomes durable prosperity. Done right, the nation can turn its geological advantage into higher value industry, stable revenues, and better livelihoods. Proof that growth and sustainability can move forward together for all Indonesians. Indonesia's nickel gamble could define the EV century, but will it pay off or backfire? Subscribe to ASEAN Finance Insider for more deep dives into the deals, the data, and the dynamics shaping this future market.